In March 2023, on the Chinese website Sohu, an article appeared saying that the main character in the Chinese student abduction case in California shook. The character mentioned was Junjiao Zhai, Helen, was released from prison and is in the process of being released. It is possible that she will change her name and try to start life in China, completely erasing memories of her time in prison in the United States. However, many people still remember this case, especially the picture with her uncomfortable smile in court, showing no remorse. She even asked the judge to quickly revoke the case because she needed to return to China to celebrate her 19th birthday. Due to the serious nature of the case, as well as the act of disrespecting the law and not accepting repentance, Helen was finally sentenced to 13 years in Bochu's prison, in which she had to serve at least 8 years before she could be released. When she heard the sentence, Helen seemed to wake up and burst into tears right in court, while her parents expressed their discontent. In their eyes, this is just a bit of a mix-up and a fight between classmates. It's the same, just a warning. I can't understand why she had to go to prison in the United States. Meanwhile, Xinlei Zhang's father, whose English name is John, one of the accomplices, expressed his dissatisfaction with the journalists. My son just came home to get a pair of scissors, did nothing, but was sentenced to 6 years. Where is justice? Where is the law? And you are watching the Red Tape channel, where we learn about the most mysterious cases, the most mysterious stories. And as usual, before we start unraveling the mysteries of today's case, please leave a like, a subscribe to support us. Thank you very much. This story must have started on March 30th, 2015. On that day, an 18-year-old Chinese girl named Ji Ran Liu, also known as Camellia, was studying in California, USA. Suddenly, she received a message on the phone. The sender was a high school classmate named Lu, whom she had known since elementary school and went to America to study. Lu invited Camellia to an ice cream shop in a nearby mall to talk. He said there was something he wanted to discuss. If it was before, Camellia would certainly not hesitate to agree because they are childhood friends. Meeting, eating, drinking is a normal thing. But this time, Camellia hesitated again. The relationship between her and her childhood friend Lu was no longer like the close friends of the day before can share everything. At first, she did not pay attention to the invitation, but Lu was very persistent, constantly texting, tone-deaf and more arrogant. After careful consideration, in the end, Camellia also agreed to meet Lu. However, before leaving, she invited another male classmate, Lu, to go with her, to increase her peace of mind. Why does a meeting between girls need a male guard? The following story will be explained in detail later. The meeting place is an ice cream shop located in the plaza area near the school. When entering the shop and seeing only Lu sitting there, Camellia breathed in softly and thought, maybe I was too worried. This is just a simple gathering of friends. But right after that, when she saw Helen with her boyfriend John appear at the door, the feeling of lightness immediately disappeared. Camellia, on the contrary, was going to run away, but was immediately avoided by the other two and had no way out. Helen turned to tell her friend Lu, we, the girls, have a few separate things to discuss. You are a boy, it is not convenient here, please avoid it. Before the appearance of a loud boy at school, her friend Lu immediately shook his head and left, leaving Camellia alone. Seeing the person she was carrying to help had left, Camellia was afraid to shake her whole body. However, Helen did not rush to touch her. Instead, she made a mistake that Lu and her boyfriend John forced Camellia to kneel to the ground. And herself, she was excited, took out the phone, called more people to help. The first person she contacted was her best friend at school, Yuhan Zhang. Her English name was Coco. When the news quickly reached the scene, Coco immediately agreed and said she would invite a few more friends to join. So the more people, the more crowded, there was no effect on the snow bridge. And all of them were students from mainland China, only about 16, 17 years old. At that time, Helen drank all the cold water on the table on top of Camellia, then ordered her to use her clothes to clean the water on the floor. Those around her looked at Camelia's pathetic image, laughing. Seeing the number of people, crowded to the point that the ice cream shop could not stand it, Helen suggested, pulling her out of the park nearby so that everyone could have a space to show off. The ambassador said no one dared to disobey the order. They took Camelia's hair and dragged her out. The female staff in the ice cream shop saw the image and wanted to stop it, but was shouted at by the crowd, forcing her to give up. So the last hope to escape Camelia also disappeared. But what Camelia did not expect was that the next 5 hours would become a real nightmare in her life. First, Helen threw a hard stone, causing her to fall to the ground. Then more than 10 people around her started hitting the stone non-stop, like rain falling on her. Camelia had no chance to evade. She could only hold her head. About 10 minutes later, Helen said, "Take a break, I'm so tired." The others took her clothes off, and so Camelia was publicly humiliated. A few other girls laughed, took their phones out to take pictures of her body. The first close friend Helen called was her aunt. Although only 18 years old, she was a cold-blooded character. At first, she did not participate, only stood on one side of the ice cream shop to observe, sniffing each leaf until Camelia was in great pain on the ground. She suddenly walked up close, using the burning tip of the leaf to stick into Camelia's skin. Suddenly, the sound of a thud rang out, burning her skin together, creating a horrific scene. Another girl took out a lighter from her bag, about to burn Camelia's hair. Fortunately, her hair was wet from the water that had been burned before, so the fire could not be caught. Thanks to that, Camelia escaped from the door. However, Helen did not intend to stop. She ordered her boyfriend John to go home and get a pair of scissors. During John's time, Helen forced Camelia to eat sand on the ground. If Camelia did not follow, others would replace each other with burning leaves to stick into her body. The helpless girl was forced to lie down on the ground, her mouth full of sand, her red face bulging because of suffocation. Camelia could only shed tears, eyes in pain, begging for forgiveness. But the people around her were not moved at all. On the contrary, they were still laughing and laughing. Some even continued to use their phones to film. Not long after, John brought the scissors back. Helen ordered the other two girls to hold Camelia tight, kneeling on the tin ground, pushing her to the end of her head. Then she used the scissors to cut Camelia's hair in a messy way, leaving the hair messy and disfigured. She did not stop there. Helen took the just cut hair, stuck it in Camelia's mouth, forced her to swallow them. The terrible psychological pressure, combined with the deathly pain, pushed Camelia into a completely desperate state. She could not stand still. Her voice was also hoarse because she coughed too much, according to Camelia's later statement at the court. And at that time, she completely believed that she would be violently exhaled right at the park. Until 5 hours later, when they were both fed up and tired, they stopped. At this time, Camelia was injured all over her body, with bruises caused by the thick lead ointment on her chest and glasses, swollen face with many bruises, and her hair was cut in a messy way, revealing her entire head. Perhaps you will wonder why a 5-hour-long riot in public has no one to intervene or report to the police. At the court, Ben Nguyen, a prosecutor, said the area was relatively desolate. In addition, on the evening of March 3rd in California, the temperature dropped rapidly, so the park was almost deserted. No one found out about the incident. However, a Los Angeles Times article revealed another fact. The reporter interviewed an unnamed witness. The woman said she saw a very noisy group of miners gathering around a picnic table, and sometimes on the ground there was a shadow. According to her, she intended to move closer to see what was going on, but was stopped by a few people in the group. Their English was not good, their voices were loud, and they kept staring at her, scaring her and deciding not to intervene. She also shared that no matter what ethnicity, such a group of miners always created a dangerous feeling. Such people are the culprits of society, especially when they are in a state of excitement due to the use of stimulants or drinking. They are no longer afraid of the sky, no longer afraid of the ground. They just need an unsuitable word to be ready to fight. They don't even know how heavy their hands are. Even some mature men are strong. When they see this scene, they have to avoid it, cheering for a girl with no sharp hands just running past. So that woman decided to leave after a month. But as soon as she got home, the first thing she did was call the police. As a result, more than 3 hours later, the police called again and said they had sent people to check, but there was no one in that area and nothing unusual. It is also difficult to completely blame the police for their ineffective work. That area is Roland High Park, which has long been a hotspot for these miners' gatherings. The noise, the heat, the destruction of public property, the harassment of passers-by are all things that happen like rice. The problem is that this group of miners is very active and fast. As soon as they see the police car lights from afar, they immediately disperse. The police are not in time, but they can't catch them. Such chaotic situations happen over and over again, making the police less patient and less focused on the cases here. However, perhaps it was the police's reckless handling that made this group of people realize that everything would not be serious. After the end of the storm, Helen was still cleaning up Camellia. She was not allowed to report to the police. Even if you report, it's no use. We have more than a dozen people who can prove to each other that no one did anything. The police will not believe your words. If you report to the police, I assure you, next time you will suffer much more than this. If the landlord's family asks about the scars on your face, just say that it was because of your beloved classmate, Liu. If you say that, we will cooperate to prove it to you. I can only say that this classmate, Liu, quickly withdrew from the middle school. Perhaps in her dream, she did not expect that not only did she run away from the middle school, leaving Camellia behind, but she was also accused of committing a crime. Helen's cruelty was truly unlimited, and Coco, who used to smoke in other people's homes, threatened more blatantly. My family has people in the police station. You just try to report. I will make you suffer. As Helen predicted when Camellia returned home with a bruised face, the landlord's family was extremely furious, immediately asking what had happened. After a month of arguing, Camellia decided not to blame her classmate, as Helen asked but took up all the courage to tell the truth. She was beaten by a group of friends in the same school. The landlord's mother, a woman of Mexican descent, was hot-tempered and hated injustice. She immediately dragged Camellia to the police station. When she saw Camelia's wounds, the woman in charge of the police station did not hesitate to ask, "Did you commit a crime against any party? Did they make you do this?" Knowing that the perpetrators were only a group of miners, the police were not surprised at their cruelty. After asking again to clarify the case, the police decided to immediately arrest all 12 people involved. Among them, the leader of the list was the head of the gang, Helen. The most cruel person was her friend Coco and her boyfriend John. However, when the police arrived at the location to carry out the arrest, they discovered that these guys had disappeared. The landlord's family said they did not return to sleep the night before, and it sure was not clear where they went. Did they hear the news and run away? When the police were about to issue an arrest warrant, a shocking scene happened. Helen and John, with a tired face, drove back in a hurry. It turned out that after the arrest, they immediately dragged each other to the karaoke bar and had fun all night long. Until the next afternoon, they could not stand it anymore. They decided to go home to rest. As a result, as soon as they got home, they touched the face of the police, who were ambushed. When the police asked Helen if she knew why she was arrested, she said she was confused. But as soon as she heard the name Camellia, Helen immediately changed her tone, spoke in both Chinese and English, shouted in a low voice, and said that when everything went down, it would definitely make Camellia pay the price. After hearing this, everyone thought that these two people had a grudge against each other, and they would definitely have to get rid of each other at all costs. It turned out that Camellia had posted on Facebook the insults of Shanghai people, causing a lot of controversy. Helen and a group of her friends are all Shanghai people, and they expressed their dissatisfaction. On March 12, 2013, near the Montero area, this incident escalated into a heated debate. Some even said that this situation had become a hatred. Some people raised doubts. Very good, you dare to go online and scold all Shanghai people. Haha, her liver is really big. These words are getting more and more serious. Camellia's call for others in the school also made people ask questions about her motivation and behaviour. This is not just a comment on the internet, but also reflects the impact of words on the internet space and the complexity of personal relationships. They are in a camellia club together. Many people began to support Helen, seeing her as a leader. Among them is Coco, a character we mentioned earlier. More than half a year ago, there was another incident. Helen, when she just publicly announced her new boyfriend, posted a series of pictures showing affection. In addition to the carefully edited selfie photos, there are also pictures full of kisses that make the viewer also have to choke because of the strong smell of love. Among a series of comments such as, "Oh my God, so beautiful, handsome, really happy," there was a series of comments that attracted special attention. The man I was bored with was now picked up by another person as a treasure. These words made Helen still proud of her charisma, and when she saw people leaving comments, the angrier she was, she immediately rushed to confront them, because the one who dared to kiss that kiss was no one else but Camellia. The reason why Camellia was so upset was because of Helen's new boyfriend. 2 weeks ago, he was still her current boyfriend. During this time, it was clear that the other guy had started dating Helen, while still dating Camellia. After breaking up, he immediately came to Helen without missing a second. In Camelia's eyes, this was a drama in which Helen was the third person who was jealous of her relationship and dared to publicly show off her privacy. This really made her both angry and angry, unable to contain her emotions. Camellia was furious. Camellia finished that comment and immediately received a reply from Helen. She suspected Camellia was a fat and ugly girl who couldn't keep her boyfriend, so she shouldn't blame anyone else. The two began to argue and used harsh words such as "this son of a bitch." What was more surprising was that this online argument quickly escalated into a real-life confrontation that was actually overwhelming for Helen. The next day, she followed several people on Camelia's way after school and beat her up. The strong impact seriously injured Camelia's spine and nose and even had to walk back. Then Helen said, "The best thing to do is not to let me see you again. If not, I'll beat you up." But the problem was that the two students of the same middle school had to see each other every day and couldn't avoid it. Therefore, Camellia was often kicked out from where she dared to reply on the internet. She gradually had to recover and didn't dare to resist. To cover up the injuries, she even had to wear a mask to avoid being discovered by her family. It can only be said that the 17-18-year-olds living in this country have learned all the tricks of adults in kicking, pulling, and even throwing the evil up many times. As Helen's power grew stronger, the target was bullied by her not only limited in Camellia, but also expanded to other students, especially girls who were shy or refused to join her group. One time, just because a girl accidentally glanced at Helen on the street, she regretted it. Then she pulled a few people to stop that girl in the basement to the point that she was dizzy. Another time, during break time, a group of students played together and just because they lost, Helen got angry. Helen got angry. She immediately slapped the opponent and a student who couldn't see reacted. As a result, Helen punched him in the nose. With this attitude, anyone who didn't open their eyes was immediately slapped. Sometimes it made people around her uncomfortable. However, for those who dared to oppose her, Helen also solved it by force. Just before Camelia's incident happened 2 days ago, a 16-year-old girl named Mai who wanted to stop Helen from bullying her friend was pulled to a park near her school and slapped for almost an hour until that girl cried for forgiveness and was released. Just like that, Helen became the school's queen. Many Chinese students saw her and hurriedly walked by. They were afraid that they would get in trouble with her. Of course, in all of her victims, Camellia was still the main target. Even when Helen broke up with her ex-boyfriend and started dating John, she still didn't forgive Camellia. Every time they didn't compete, quarrelled with their parents, or were criticised by their teachers, all the dissatisfaction in Helen's life was sucked up by Camellia with punches. In her eyes, Camellia was just a bag of sand for her to get rid of. It can't be denied that later, when Helen stood in front of the court, she said, "Only bullying Chinese people, not American people." This is completely true. According to some students interviewed by Los Angeles Times, Helen's victims all have certain characteristics. And when faced with American natives, whether they are white, black, Mexican or Korean students in school, she not only did not act, but also took the initiative. It was as if she had completely switched from being aggressive to being cold to foreigners. Not only cruel, but also shy. Helen's actions really made others speechless. When faced with a police officer's question, she expressed her frustration and continued to be intimidated with an attitude like, "Hurry up, ask me to go back to sleep." After that, she also said, "Next month I have to go back to my 19th birthday party. Don't be late. End it quickly." After that, the police officer informed her that with 12 crimes related to kidnapping, assault, torture, all are serious crimes against the law, not just reporting to the school. However, not everyone understood like Helen. Among the 12 students involved in the case, 6 people ran away as soon as they heard the news. Some even did not take their clothes, just hurried up to the taxi and rushed to the airport, afraid that they would be detained at the port and would not be able to leave. Therefore, of the 12 people, only 6 were arrested. In addition to Helen, Coco and Joan, the other 3 are all young people who will be tried at the youth court. And when the parents of these 3 famous defendants heard the news, they hurriedly flew to the US. A very exciting and funny drama has also begun. According to some articles, they say these 3 people are rich families. And the victim, Camellia, is a poor girl who has to dress up to have money to study thanks to the scholarship. However, according to the investigation by Los Angeles Times and the New York's Times, the situation of these people's families is not as controversial as rumored. Joan's father, in an interview, said that their family in China was just a normal middle-class family. Sending their children to study abroad for several years has wiped out the savings of the whole family. He also emphasized that the real rich kids of China are families who have bought a house in the US for a long time. However, no matter what, parents can pay $13,000 per year for a private middle school and $18,000 for a boarding school, which is at least part of the middle class in China. And if they knew it was a poor school, the cost was so high that the family had to argue why they still had to send their children to study abroad. Joan's father said that partly because Chinese people have a good mentality. Others have, we have, others send their children to study abroad, we have to follow. Therefore, a friend of Joan's high school said the family would send their children to study abroad and asked their family if they wanted to go with them. Hearing this, Joan immediately agreed because she heard that in American schools there were few exercises and low pressure to study. Moreover, study centers persuaded that young people who go to study abroad early will be able to learn easy languages, graduate from middle school, can take the US university directly, work and settle down easily. Joan's father said that his father was so hot-tempered that he immediately sent his children abroad. And for the main culprit, Helen, as the saying goes, every problem student has a family with a problem. According to reports from Sanlian and NetEase, some information about Helen's family was revealed. Some people said that her parents were officials, some people said they were businessmen, but during Helen's growing up, they were definitely naked. People said when she was young, she was sent back to her hometown to be raised by her grandparents. The grandparents were very strict with their children, so strict that they couldn't tell right from wrong. For example, when Helen was still studying, there was a time when she played with her friends, didn't say anything, immediately hit her. But her grandparents not only did not criticize education, but also blamed the teacher for not taking good care of her and said that her parents were causing too much trouble. Growing up in such an environment, she became stubborn. Her personality was also hot-tempered, just a little bit of anger. When she was sent back to live with her parents to study, both sides felt very difficult to integrate. Living together became difficult. Compared to the parents who try to limit the relationship with their children by trying to take sincerity to build trust, Helen's parents applied a very simple and crude method. That is to spend a large amount of money to send her to an orphanage to see her replace them, educate her children. Helen remembered that from young to old, it was difficult for her to live with her parents for 2 days because if it lasted longer, the whole family would have a conflict. Therefore, she did not like to stay at home. And at school, Helen was also famous as a hard-to-tell student. Even in a strict orphanage, she still went to smoke, drink, hang out with friends, bully younger students, and steal their money. Every semester, Helen's trash bin was always full of notes. She even had to stick a few more sheets of paper. When the school responded to these problems with her parents, asking them to cooperate in education, Helen's parents thought that we sent her to school not for the teachers to teach her. They said there were no children who could not be taught, only teachers who did not know how to teach. Speaking of anger, they were willing to transfer her to another school because, in their eyes, anything that could be solved with money was not a big deal. Helen graduated from a high school in the northern region of Shanghai, and students in the top 100 of the class all had opportunities in high schools. However, her achievements clearly did not meet the requirements. After graduating from high school, Helen's parents wanted to send her to study in the US, contact a few consulting firms, and finally choose a private high school in Los Angeles because the consulting firms said this was a school with a good social system, good environment, and strict management. However, Helen's parents did not think that the problems of the girl had existed for a long time. Previously, many schools and teachers gave up when she was most confused. If she was sent to the farthest place from her parents, could it make Jesus appear and create an American style? Just think a little bit and you'll know. According to a medical report provided by Helen's lawyer, in her first year of study, she had a lot of problems because she could not communicate in English, could not catch up with the school program, and her personality was difficult to integrate, could not make friends. Under the pressure and feeling of loneliness, she became worried, lost sleep, used her hair, ate and drank uncontrollably. During that year, she had 2 unsuccessful suicide attempts and hurt herself many times. Fortunately, the family helped her discover in time. If not, it was a big deal. The school advised her to see a psychiatrist, but the effect was not worth mentioning. She asked her parents to send her back home by phone, but her parents said it was nonsense. She was just pretending. They told her to try a little more, be a little more patient, just like when she was in China. Her parents blamed Helen's displeasure with the school and the family for helping her. After contacting another tourist organization, they decided to transfer Helen to a private school with a higher rate of Chinese students so that Helen could easily communicate with friends of the same age. The support family was also replaced by a strict American family into a ready-to-do immigrant family as long as there was money. After transferring, her mental state improved significantly. She no longer cried and missed home like she did before, but returned to her arrogant and rebellious appearance. Looking back at what happened later, this is actually how she transferred her anger and anxiety to others, building her own joy on the pain of others, using bad behavior to relieve stress and strengthen her power. At the same time, she did not forget to boast about her wealth on the internet. This arrogant behavior also made her subordinates, those who do not have a car or only ride bicycles, jealous of her, as well as Helen's reputation, known as the wealthy young lady, also spread all over the school. According to John's father, his son was a shy little talker, but was quickly drawn to Helen's initiative. A big reason was that she had let John borrow her car. The 18-year-old boy was in a period of excitement. Every day, his girlfriend's car was showing off all over the place with a guard, so how could he care about anything else? So on the day of the crime, although he did not participate in the murder of Camellia from start to finish, he did not hesitate. When Helen ordered her to go home to get the scissors, he did not hesitate but followed. But this very scissor got him involved in the case. The reason is that in crimes related to kidnapping, torture, anyone who participates, whether it's driving a car or holding a scissor, are all considered accomplices and cannot avoid the punishment of the law. The seriousness of these crimes can also be shown by the amount of ransom of the 3 defendants, John, Coco and Helen, on April 14, 2015 during an investigation at the High Court, Pomona, California. Some accomplices fled to China after the incident. The The judge said they were at risk of escaping, so the amount of ransom was set at $3 million per person. For John and Coco's family, this is a lot of money, so they had to ask Helen's parents for help, because before that, Helen had many times bragged on the internet that her family was a rich family with assets up to millions of dollars. With Helen's family, there was no other way to get the money, but a dramatic scene happened. Helen's parents could not pay the amount of ransom, so Helen, like the other two, had to be detained and waited to continue the trial. When she knew she would be taken back to prison, this was the first time Helen burst into tears, and her parents also cried. However, not being able to pay the ransom does not mean the ransom has no effect. In May 2015, when the case was about to be heard for the second time, an unexpected event happened and the court had to stop immediately. The prosecutor said a father of the accused was arrested for incitement and was about to face incitement and disobedience charges. Although the police did not reveal the details of the case, there was information on the internet revealing that this father had not only kidnapped Camellia, but also a 16-year-old student named Mac who had been raped by Helen. This father had sent $20,000 to the two and asked them to testify in court, saying that bullying was just a joke among the students. After being denied, this father even shouted in a threatening voice, saying, Have people in the police station in the country, do you still want to go back to the country? The blatant act of defamation was also threatening. It could be said to bring a characteristic of Chinese culture to the United States. But the US court did not tolerate such nonsense. If you dare to do these naughty things, you and your daughter go meet in jail. Seeing that he had pushed the case too far, some parents blamed the school and said that because the school environment was not strict, this behaviour was getting worse and eventually led to a major disaster. They kept defending, breaking down to find a way out. But the quality of education and management of this school is really hard to say. Some local media have reported that the school named Oxford School is actually just a name after Oxford University. The connection between the two places is similar to the relationship between President Trump and the official language of Sichuan. It's just a name, there's no real connection. This can be seen clearly on the school's advertising website. Only the code 18760 is column rows, but from different angles, the effect of the image is clearly different. If you look at the whole picture, you can hardly recognize that this is a school. Except for an old window and a conveyor belt, there is almost no space or equipment to serve students' outdoor activities. Not only is the outside environment a noisy area after a cheap market, but the learning environment inside is also not less worrying. This picture, the light can be said to be enough to make a ghost movie, is the picture that the school chose to make an advertising image for the room. The actual situation may be as chaotic as impossible to see. Not only is the school's material infrastructure not as low as many vocational schools in small provinces of China, but the quality of students is also very worrying. On a website evaluating private schools, this school only received 4 ratings and all agreed for 1 star. A parent left a comment saying that the school had left a teacher using offensive language to call Asian students as Asian garbage. There were even inappropriate behaviours with girls. The result is a flood of bad results in one school. But this school from the inside out looks like a professional team and dares to charge up to the $13,000 per year. Of course, their main customers are mainly Asian students, most of whom are students from China and South Korea. Moreover, perhaps the school itself also realised that this student ratio would make them sound like a noisy school. Therefore, the school has opened a number of private schools for Asian students, such as Chinese math, to attract more Asian students. This is a school, so on the website, the students only say that students can choose to stay with the Bansu family. The number of international students is 80 and also choose to stay with the Bansu family. However, on another page on the same website, in the ethnic structure of the students, it is clearly written that 100% of the students are Asian and they all stay with the Bansu family. In fact, it can be said that there is nothing hidden. The number is 127 students. All stay with the Bansu family. But how can parents who intend to send their children abroad recognize the hidden tricks in this? After being tricked, they still give money to the school. The school is like that, and the Bansu families that they arrange for the show, students can imagine. Not only the meal is bad, but the place is also not better. Many families completely neglect the safety and educational situation of the students. The only request is that the children have to go home at night, which is their responsibility. Usually, the children will stay out overnight, even for a few weeks, but no one cares. With a school like this, a group of teenagers of just over 10 years old, gathering together, nothing new happens. It can be said that the parents' intention is to send their children abroad to train their independence, improve their self-care, and learn to take advantage from the beginning. But in fact, it's like they take their children on a plane and drop them in the middle of the ocean. Below are the fish waiting. Then a rock makes the children fall down and hope. The children will know how to swim, but the reward and risk are clearly not worth it. What makes people uncomfortable is not only such inexperienced children being deceived, but even their parents do not get out of the hands of the cheaters. As mentioned earlier, John's father said after he came to the US, he received a few calls. The other caller described the US prison as a hell and affirmed that as long as he gave money, he could save his son. This cheap trick to parents who are worried is usually very effective. Deceived to the point of tears, John's father hurriedly gave the money. Then of course the story has no end. It can be said that when going abroad, keep the money tight and guard the east. That is the most effective way to reduce the possibility of being deceived. In June 2015, the court was reopened. The main culprit, Helen, turned herself into a main character on stage. According to the description of a reporter from the Chinese magazine New Week, present at the trial, she repeatedly gave angry, sarcastic and contemptuous expressions, eyes full of challenge, making others unable to not be surprised. But when she saw the victim, Camellia, step on the stage, Helen immediately glanced at her with tears in her eyes. Not only that, she also repeatedly complained to the interpreter that Camellia was lying. Seeing her arrogant attitude, the judge could not stand it and warned her that she could not have any expression or action in the courtroom, could not express her personal attitude to the interpreter. This is the court's rule, understand? Seeing the judge angry, Helen was partly restrained. However, all three continued not to plead guilty to 12 charges. Therefore, the case proceeded according to the court procedure, and then another step happened. 6 months later, among the 6 fugitives, a man named Liu Zhang was arrested. It turned out that he did not return to the country, but came to his friend's house in another state to cook. From Tiet Son, he escaped to Tiet Dongqi, escaped for 9 months. Finally, for driving without a license, he was arrested and found out that he was exiled in California. Perhaps because he was detained for 9 months, he almost did not plead guilty and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The conviction of Liu Zhang put Helen, John and Coco in a very difficult situation because all 4 people were involved in the same case. When one person pleads guilty, this will have a very negative impact on the court of the other people. Simply put, they are the same people. One person has fallen, the other people will not be able to escape. After a 2-month hearing between the prosecutor and the prosecution, the 2 sides finally agreed. The prosecution withdrew the accusation of the crime of treason, kept the crimes of kidnapping, assault and serious injuries. While the press convinced the 3 defendants to plead guilty, the lawyer told Helen that if she insisted on not pleading guilty, there was only one way to go, through the court procedure. If the prosecution wins, she will have to face a life sentence. At this time, Helen has just realized the seriousness of the matter and has to choose to plead guilty. Anyway, there is still a chance to plead guilty later. But if she persists in arguing, she may have to stay in prison with criminals. In the end, Helen was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Her accomplice was sentenced to 10 years, and John, who only came home to get scissors, was sentenced to 6 years. Because the 3 previous defendants did not pay bail and were detained, During this time, they will have to pay double fines every day to enter the bounty formal trial. According to US law, to be able to plead guilty soon, they have to serve at least 75% of the time. In fact, they will have to stay in prison for a very long time before they can be released. Helen's actual sentence time is less than 8 years. Coco is 5 years, and John is more than 3 years. They will be returned to China immediately after being released and do not have to serve during their stay in the US. This means the prison will be their last place in the US. Before being officially imprisoned, Helen apologized through a lawyer. In the letter, she said her family brought her to the US to have a better chance of development, but she was freed, which was frustrating. Helen hopes everyone can forgive her and give her a chance to start over, because her 5-hour sentence only accounts for a very small part of her 19 years of life. It's impossible for a small part to deny her entire life. To put it bluntly, this letter, instead of an apology, is like when she saw the coffin and finally shed tears but did not forget to protect herself. The letter is not long, the words are simple, but it is still read by her lawyer. During the process, Helen sat next to her and used an A4 paper to cover her face. I don't know how ashamed she was or how convinced she was that her sincere apology and her wish to start over could not happen. Or maybe, as some people read, even though she had been in the US for 4 years, she could not speak English. Even a letter like that had to be helped by others. Nevertheless, the US prison not only taught them how to be human, but also helped them learn English clearly. This may be more valuable than the fact that her parents spent a lot of money to send her to a normal school. For example, as Joan said to her father, her English is very good now. Before, she only knew words but did not dare to speak. Now in prison, all around her are Americans, blacks and Mexicans. There are no Chinese people forced to open their mouths to speak, and her English has improved rapidly. Some people say that whether it is the criminal group led by Helen or Camellia, those who are bullied are the tragedy of children who are thrown abroad. It is said that parents send their unadulterated children abroad as if they were released. After paying, they no longer care to let them develop freely, let go of bad instincts. Although the parents' intention is good, they want their children to have a bright future, but ignore their mental health. Many people think that forcing children to go to school in China is just a small thing in school, but they do not expect to suffer serious consequences in an American court where the policy is not tolerant. This is a lesson that can be learned in another way, but now it takes many years in prison to learn. It's really not worth it. Camellia is really unfortunate because she had to endure the bullying that ordinary people could not imagine, both physically and mentally, causing serious injuries. These injuries may take a lot of time, even a lifetime, to heal. But she is also lucky because the police and the US are on her side like superheroes in the movies from heaven down, punishing bad guys and protecting the right to really solve the root cause of violence and promote a culture of respect for students, while having a policy that is not tolerant of violence. A survey published in 2019 showed that every 3 students in the world has one person who has or is subjected to street violence at the same level. The report calls on all countries, organisations and individuals to join hands with the legal goal to deal with street violence. Not being tolerant of violence is extremely important, but an important cause of increasing street violence is the victim who is afraid and does not dare to seek help. And today's story comes to an end. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And before leaving, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell to follow the next classic cases on Red Tape channel.